The sun filtered softly through the blinds as Peter gazed out the window, his eyes tracing the movements of children playing in the small park across the street. Their laughter filled the air, a melody of carefree joy. Yet, it didn't ease the weight pressing down on his chest. Behind him, the living room was eerily quiet except for the soft rustle of a plush elephant being hugged tightly by his daughter, Riley. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, her tiny frame hunched protectively over the stuffed animal as though it were her lifeline. Peter turned from the window, his gaze settling on her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "You all set for school tomorrow?" His voice carried the kind of warmth that only a father's concern could offer. Riley's small shoulders shrugged, and she avoided his gaze, her deep brown eyes focused on the elephant in her arms. "I guess so," she murmured, her tone void of the enthusiasm that had once been a staple of her personality. Peter frowned, his heart twisting with worry. Riley wasn't just his daughter. She was his world. And her silence, the way her light had dimmed over the past few weeks, was almost unbearable. A few weeks ago, she had been practically bouncing off the walls with excitement about starting kindergarten. Now, she seemed like a shadow of the child she used to be. "Did something happen at school today?" he asked, his voice a careful mix of concern and encouragement. He rested a hand lightly on her shoulder, his touch as gentle as his words. Riley clutched her stuffed elephant tighter, her lips quivering. "Some kids made fun of me," she whispered, the words so soft Peter had to lean closer to catch them. His heart clenched, anger and sadness swelling in equal measure. He wished he could shield her from every unkind word, every sting of childhood cruelty. But he knew that wasn't how the world worked. Still, the pain in her voice broke something inside him. "What did they say?" he asked, his tone firm yet tender. "It's okay, honey. You can tell me." Riley hesitated before speaking. "They said my hair looks weird," she admitted, her voice cracking as she glanced up at him. "Like it's messy. They laughed at me." Peter's chest tightened as he looked at his daughter's beautiful curly hair, so much like her mother's. It was one of the things he cherished most about her, a testament to the vibrant, unique person she was. How could anyone fail to see that? "Your hair is amazing, Riley," he said with conviction, brushing a gentle hand over her curls. "It's part of what makes you so special. Don't ever let anyone make you feel bad about it." Riley looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes searching his face. "Really?" "Really," Peter said, his tone steady. "You're unique, sweetheart, and that's a beautiful thing. Some people might not understand that, but being different is what makes the world interesting. You're one of a kind." A faint smile flickered across Riley's face, but Peter could see that the pain lingered just beneath the surface. He resisted the urge to push for more. She was only 5, and finding the words to express what she was feeling wasn't easy. He'd have to be patient, even as his heart ached to fix everything for her. As Peter sat beside her on the floor, an idea began to form in his mind. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but one thing was certain. He couldn't just stand by and let this happen. Riley deserved to feel safe, happy, and confident, and he would do whatever it took to make that a reality. That night, as Peter tucked Riley into bed, he noticed something unusual. "Where's Ellie?" he asked, looking around for her beloved stuffed elephant. Riley's lower lip trembled, and her voice was barely audible when she replied, "I don't know. I couldn't find her after school." Peter's stomach sank. Ellie wasn't just a toy. She was Riley's comfort, her constant companion since she was a baby. Losing Ellie felt like losing a piece of her stability in an already difficult time. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said, stroking her hair softly. "We'll find her." But as he kissed her goodnight and left her room, Peter couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Riley's sadness was more than just a passing phase, and he needed to figure out what was causing it. Sitting at the kitchen table later that night, he began scribbling ideas in a notebook, determined to find a way to help his little girl. I won't let this go on, he whispered to himself, no matter what it takes. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet kitchen as Peter stared at the notepad in front of him, a dozen half-formed ideas scrawled across the page. Each one ended in a question mark, his uncertainty glaring back at him. How could he protect Riley without overstepping? Was there a way to uncover the truth without making her feel like she'd done something wrong? His pen hovered over the paper as his mind cycled through possibilities. He considered talking to the teacher, but what if Riley was too scared to share the full story? A meeting with the principal might help, but he worried it could make things worse if the other kids found out. The last thing he wanted was for her to feel more isolated. Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. The ache in his chest wouldn't let him rest. He needed to act. After hours of contemplation, he pulled out his laptop and began to search for solutions. His fingers hesitated as he typed, guilt already prickling at the edges of his conscience. Discreet recording devices, he murmured to himself, scrolling through the results. The idea felt invasive, even wrong, but the image of Riley's tear-filled eyes was a weight he couldn't ignore. He needed to know what was happening when she was away from him. After an hour of research, Peter found what he was looking for, a tiny recorder no larger than a button. It was designed to be easily hidden, with a battery life long enough to last an entire school day. His stomach churned as he clicked, "Buy now," the action feeling both desperate and decisive. "This is for her," he whispered, trying to convince himself. "She needs me to understand what's going on." The next few days were a blur of tension as Peter waited for the package to arrive. He watched Riley closely, hoping for clues, but her behavior only deepened his concern. At breakfast, she pushed her food around her plate without eating. After school, her answers to his questions were short and evasive. "How was school today, sweetheart?" "Fine," she'd reply, her voice flat as she stared at the floor. Peter could see the shadows under her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. He felt powerless, trapped in a cycle of worry and uncertainty. When the package finally arrived, Peter's hands trembled as he opened it. The device was as small as advertised, a sleek black button that fit easily in the palm of his hand. That night, after Riley had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table turning the recorder over and over in his hands. "Am I doing the right thing?" he asked aloud, the silence offering no answers. The next morning, Peter woke early, determined to follow through with his plan. As Riley ate breakfast, he prepared her hair for the day, carefully braiding her curls. "Your hair looks so pretty today, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "Thanks, Daddy," Riley murmured, her gaze fixed on her plate. Peter slipped the tiny device into one of the braids, securing it with a small pin. He felt a pang of guilt as he did it, but he reminded himself of his purpose. This wasn't about spying, it was about protecting his little girl. As he drove Riley to school, Peter's heart was heavy with anticipation. "Have a great day, honey," he said as they pulled up to the drop-off zone. "I will," Riley replied, her voice quiet but sincere. She waved as she walked into the building, her small figure disappearing through the doors. Peter sat in the car for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He felt torn between wanting to rush in after her and trusting that he was doing the right thing. With a deep breath, he started the car and drove home, his mind racing with what he might hear when he played the recording back. Back at the house, the hours dragged by as Peter waited for the school day to end. He busied himself with chores, but his thoughts were never far from Riley. When it was finally time to pick her up, he drove to the school with a mix of dread and anticipation. "How was your day, sweetie?" he asked as Riley climbed into the car. "Okay," she said, her tone neutral. Peter studied her face in the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of what she might have experienced. She seemed tired but otherwise calm, and he decided not to push her for details. Once they were home and Riley was settled in with a snack and her favorite show, Peter excused himself to his office. His hands shook as he retrieved the recorder from her hair, carefully plugging it into his computer. The audio feed crackled to life, filling his headphones with the familiar sounds of a kindergarten classroom. Children chattered and laughed, the teacher's voice rising above the din as she gave instructions. For a moment, Peter's anxiety lessened. Maybe he'd overreacted. Maybe everything was fine. But then he heard it. "Give it back," a child's voice demanded. "No way," another voice replied, laced with cruelty. "It's ours now." Peter's heart stopped as he heard Riley's small voice, hesitant and pleading. "But that's mine. Please, it's from my daddy." The sound of laughter followed, sharp and mocking. Peter's fists clenched as he listened to the exchange, each word cutting deeper than the last. "You're so weird," one child said. "Why don't you just go away?" Tears burned in Peter's eyes as he heard Riley's sniffles, her quiet attempt to hold back sobs. The recording continued, revealing a pattern of exclusion and unkindness that made Peter's stomach churn. By the time the recording ended, Peter was shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. He could hear the strain in Riley's voice, the effort it took for her to keep going despite the cruelty she faced. Without hesitation, Peter reached for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number for the school's front office. "Maple Grove Elementary. How can I help you?" The receptionist answered. "This is Peter Roberts, Riley's father," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I need to speak with the principal. It's urgent." The receptionist's voice was calm but hesitant. "Mr. Roberts, Principal Anderson is in a meeting right now. Would you like me to have her call you back?" Peter tightened his grip on the phone, his jaw clenching. "No," he said firmly. "This can't wait. I need to speak with her immediately." "One moment, please," the receptionist replied, her voice softening. Peter could hear her muffled footsteps as she walked away, and then the muted hum of hold music filled the line. Every second felt like an eternity as Peter's mind raced. He replayed the cruel words from the recording over and over, each one like a dagger to his heart. By the time the principal's voice came on the line, his hands were trembling. "Mr. Roberts, this is Principal Anderson," she said, her tone professional but warm. "I understand you need to speak with me about something urgent." Peter took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "Yes, it's about my daughter, Riley. She's in Mrs. Carter's kindergarten class." "Of course. How can I help you?" Peter hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been noticing some changes in Riley's behavior over the past few weeks. She's withdrawn, she's not eating well, and she seems sad all the time. I suspected something was going on at school, and today I confirmed it." Principal Anderson's tone shifted, concern evident in her voice. "What do you mean by confirmed it, Mr. Roberts?" Peter swallowed hard. "I placed a small recording device in her hair this morning. I know that might sound extreme, but I was desperate to understand what's been happening to her. When I listened to the recording, I heard other kids bullying her, mocking her, stealing her things, and telling her to go away." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Peter could almost hear the wheels turning in Principal Anderson's mind. "Mr. Roberts," she said finally, "I'm deeply sorry to hear that Riley has been experiencing this. Bullying is something we take very seriously at Maple Grove, and I assure you, we will address this immediately." Peter's voice rose slightly, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "With all due respect, Principal Anderson, if bullying is something you take so seriously, how has this been allowed to go on? My daughter is 5 years old and she's coming home every day feeling like she doesn't belong. How did no one notice?" Principal Anderson sighed. "You're absolutely right to be upset, Mr. Roberts. I can't offer an excuse, but I can promise you that we'll investigate this thoroughly. I'll meet with Mrs. Carter and the other staff members to determine what's been happening in the classroom and on the playground. And of course, I'd like to meet with you and Riley as soon as possible." Peter's jaw tightened. "That's a start," he said, his tone clipped. "But I'm not going to sit back and wait for you to figure this out. I want to know exactly what steps you're taking to make sure this doesn't happen again. Not just to Riley, but to any other child." Principal Anderson's voice was steady. "I understand, Mr. Roberts. Let's set up a meeting for tomorrow morning. I'll have Mrs. Carter join us and we can discuss a plan of action. Peter agreed, though his frustration lingered even after he hung up the phone. He stared at the notepad on the table, now filled with scribbled notes and ideas. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, guilt, determination, but above all, an overwhelming need to protect Riley. That evening, Peter approached Riley as she sat on the couch, her eyes glued to her favorite cartoon. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, sitting down beside her. Riley glanced up at him, her expression wary. "Hi, Daddy." Peter hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject without upsetting her. Finally, he decided honesty was the best approach. "I talked to your principal today," he said softly, "about what's been happening at school." Riley's eyes widened, and she immediately looked away. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. Peter's heart broke at her words. He reached out, gently tilting her chin so she would look at him. "You don't have anything to be sorry for," he said firmly. "None of this is your fault, Riley. I just want to help you. That's all." Riley's eyes filled with tears. "But what if the kids get mad at me because you told—" Peter pulled her into a hug, his hand smoothing over her curls. "It's my job to make sure you're safe and happy," he said, his voice steady. "And it's your school's job to make sure no one feels scared or left out. If anyone gets mad, I'll be there to handle it. You don't have to face this alone." Riley clung to him, her small body trembling. "I don't want to go back," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. Peter closed his eyes, his own tears threatening to fall. "I know, sweetheart," he murmured, "but we're going to fix this. I promise." The next morning, Peter and Riley arrived at Maple Grove Elementary just as the first bell rang. Principal Anderson greeted them at the front office, her expression warm but serious. "Mr. Roberts, Riley," she said, nodding at them both. "Thank you for coming in." Peter noticed Mrs. Carter standing nearby, her face pale and drawn. She looked genuinely distressed, and for a brief moment, Peter's anger softened. "Let's head to my office," Principal Anderson said, gesturing for them to follow her. The small room was cozy but professional, with bookshelves lining the walls and a large oak desk in the center. Principal Anderson took her seat behind the desk, while Peter and Riley sat side by side in the chairs opposite her. Mrs. Carter sat to the right, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mr. Roberts," Principal Anderson began, "I want to start by apologizing. It's clear that we've failed Riley, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Peter nodded curtly, his arms crossed. "I appreciate the apology, but I need to know what you're going to do about it." Principal Anderson glanced at Mrs. Carter, who cleared her throat nervously. "I've spoken with the other staff members who supervise recess and lunch," Mrs. Carter said, "and we're already making changes to ensure better oversight during unstructured times. We've also started talking to the other children in Riley's class to understand what's been going on." Principal Anderson continued, "Additionally, we're implementing an anti-bullying program that includes role-playing exercises, discussions about empathy, and clear consequences for unkind behavior. And of course, we'll be checking in with Riley regularly to make sure she feels safe." Peter listened intently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "That's a good start," he said. "But I'll be following up to make sure these changes actually happen. Riley deserves better, and so do the other kids." Riley shifted in her seat, glancing up at her father with a mixture of relief and admiration. For the first time in weeks, Peter saw a spark of hope in her eyes. After the meeting, Peter walked Riley to her classroom, holding her hand tightly. He could feel her small fingers trembling in his grip, her nervous energy radiating through him like a current. "You'll be okay, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling to meet her eye level. "Mrs. Carter knows what's been going on, and she's going to make sure everything's better from now on." Riley hesitated, her eyes darting toward the classroom door where the murmur of children's voices spilled out into the hallway. "What if they don't stop?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Peter placed his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Then we'll deal with it together. You're not alone in this, Riley. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Riley nodded slowly, her expression uncertain but trusting. Peter watched as she walked into the classroom, her steps tentative but steady. A part of him wanted to stay, to hover outside the door all day, but he knew he had to let her face this on her own, even if it was hard to watch her struggle. As he left the school, Peter's thoughts turned to the promises made during the meeting. While he appreciated the principal and Mrs. Carter's efforts, he wasn't about to let the matter rest entirely in their hands. He needed to ensure real, lasting change, for Riley and for every child at the school. That evening, Peter sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, determined to learn everything he could about bullying prevention and support. He pored over articles, research studies, and parenting forums, jotting down notes and ideas as he went. Strategies for building resilience in children, one headline read. Another article detailed the importance of teaching emotional intelligence from a young age. Peter bookmarked every resource he found useful, his notepad filling quickly with ideas. As the hours ticked by, a plan began to take shape. He would start by organizing a meeting with other parents, creating a support group where they could share concerns and collaborate on solutions. He'd also volunteer at the school, offering his time to help with playground supervision or classroom activities. This isn't just about Riley, he murmured to himself, typing out an email to the principal to propose his ideas. It's about creating a community where every kid feels safe and supported. Peter's determination grew with each passing moment. He wasn't just fighting for his daughter, he was fighting for a better environment for all the children at Maple Grove. The next morning, Peter shared his plans with Riley over breakfast. "What do you think about me spending some time at your school?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Riley's eyes widened. "Like, in my classroom?" "Not every day," Peter clarified. "But maybe I can help out during recess or lunch. That way I can see how things are going and make sure everyone's being kind." Riley hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think that would be okay," she said. "But will the other kids think it's weird?" Peter smiled. "I don't think so, honey. Lots of parents volunteer at school. Besides, I won't embarrass you, I promise." Riley's lips curved into a small smile, and Peter felt a flicker of hope. It was a small step, but it was progress. Over the next few weeks, Peter threw himself into his new role as an advocate for change. He attended every parent-teacher meeting, joined the PTA, and worked closely with Principal Anderson to implement the anti-bullying program. He even hosted a workshop for parents, sharing strategies for recognizing the signs of bullying and teaching their children how to stand up for themselves and others. Meanwhile, Riley began to blossom under the changes at school. With the increased supervision during recess and the introduction of the new anti-bullying curriculum, she started to feel safer and more confident. Her teachers reported that she was speaking up more in class and participating in group activities with enthusiasm. At home, Peter noticed a shift in Riley's demeanor. She smiled more often, her laughter returning in bursts of joy that filled the house. One evening, as they played a board game together, Riley looked up at him with bright eyes. "Daddy," she said, "guess what happened at school today?" Peter's heart leapt at the excitement in her voice. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I made a new friend," Riley exclaimed. "Her name is Harper, and she likes elephants too." Peter grinned, his chest swelling with pride and relief. "That's wonderful, Riley. I'm so happy for you." Riley beamed, and Peter couldn't help but marvel at her resilience. Despite everything she had been through, she was finding her way back to happiness, one small victory at a time. One afternoon, as Peter was volunteering during recess, he witnessed a moment that made all his efforts feel worthwhile. A group of children were playing tag, their laughter echoing across the playground. Riley and Harper were among them, their faces lit with joy. Nearby, another child stood alone, watching the game with a forlorn expression. Riley noticed him and paused, her brow furrowing. After a moment, she ran over to him, her voice carrying across the playground. "Do you want to play with us?" she asked, her tone kind and welcoming. The boy hesitated, then nodded shyly. Riley took his hand and led him toward the group, introducing him to the other kids. Within moments, he was laughing and running alongside them, his earlier sadness forgotten. Peter felt a lump form in his throat as he watched his daughter. She had faced her own struggles with courage and grace, and now she was extending that same kindness to others. "That's my girl," he murmured, pride swelling in his chest. As the months passed, the changes at Maple Grove became evident. The anti-bullying program had a noticeable impact, fostering a culture of kindness and inclusion among the students. Parents worked together to support the school's efforts, and the community grew stronger as a result. For Peter, the journey had been challenging, but it had also been deeply rewarding. He had learned the importance of listening to his child, of trusting her resilience while still providing unwavering support. And for Riley, the experience had taught her that she was stronger than she realized. With her father by her side, she had found her voice, her confidence, and her place in the world. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Riley leaned against Peter's side, her head resting on his shoulder. "Daddy," she said softly, "thank you for helping me." Peter wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "Always, sweetheart," he replied. "I'll always be here for you." As the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Peter felt a profound sense of peace. They had faced the storm together, and now they were stronger for it. Peter's days of relative calm didn't last long. Though he cherished the bond he had built with Keisha and the progress she was making, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were still challenges ahead. One evening, while cleaning up the dinner table, he noticed Keisha sitting quietly at her little desk in the corner of the living room. She was scribbling on a piece of paper, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Peter asked, drying his hands on a dish towel. Keisha glanced up briefly, her cheeks flushing. "A letter," she said softly. Peter crouched beside her, intrigued. "A letter? For who?" "For Mia," Keisha replied, mentioning her classmate and new best friend. "She's been sad lately. She says some kids don't want to play with her because of her glasses." Peter's chest tightened at her words. "That's so kind of you to write her a letter. What are you saying in it?" Keisha hesitated before holding up the paper. Her neat, childlike handwriting filled the page, and at the bottom, she had drawn a bright rainbow and 2 stick figures holding hands. Peter read aloud. "Dear Mia, you're the best friend ever. I love how your glasses make you look so smart. You're the nicest person in the whole class, and if anyone is mean to you, I'll be there. Your friend, Keisha." Peter swallowed hard, overcome by pride. "Keisha, this is beautiful," he said, hugging her tightly. "You're such a thoughtful friend." Keisha smiled shyly. "Do you think it will make her happy?" "I know it will," Peter assured her. "Kindness like this can make someone's whole day better." The next morning, Peter dropped Keisha off at school and watched as she eagerly handed the folded letter to Mia. The 2 girls hugged, and Peter could see Mia's face light up with a smile. It was a small gesture, but it held so much power. As Peter drove away, his thoughts turned to the larger picture. Keisha's kindness had been a beacon of hope for her classmates, but he knew that other children might still be struggling in silence. He resolved to take further action, not just as a parent, but as an advocate for change. Later that week, Peter scheduled a meeting with Ms. Ramirez and the school's new counselor, Ms. Thompson. They sat together in the principal's office, surrounded by stacks of reports and policy documents. "Keisha's kindness group has been a huge success," Peter began, "but I think there's an opportunity to expand it into something bigger, something that can reach more children and address deeper issues." Ms. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "What are you envisioning, Mr. Ricks?" Peter took a deep breath. "A mentorship program, pairing older students with younger ones. Kids like Mia or Keisha could have someone to look up to, someone who can help them feel supported when things get tough." Ms. Ramirez's eyes lit up. "That's an excellent idea. It could foster empathy and build stronger connections between the students, Ms. Thompson added, and it might also help the older students develop leadership skills. It's a win-win. The three of them spent the next hour brainstorming the logistics. They discussed training sessions for the mentors, structured activities for the pairs, and ways to measure the program's impact. By the time the meeting ended, Peter felt a renewed sense of purpose. When the mentorship program launched a month later, the response was overwhelming. Students from the upper grades eagerly signed up to become mentors, and the younger children, including Keisha, were excited to meet their big buddies. Keisha was paired with a sixth grader named Zoe, a confident and artistic girl who immediately bonded with her. "Zoe likes to draw just like me," Keisha exclaimed to Peter after their first meeting. "She said she'll teach me how to paint with watercolors." Peter smiled. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so glad you two are getting along." Over the weeks, Peter noticed how much Zoe's influence boosted Keisha's confidence. She began trying new things, from painting intricate pictures to volunteering to lead class activities. Zoe, in turn, thrived as a mentor, taking pride in helping Keisha grow. One afternoon, as Peter picked Keisha up from school, Ms. Ramirez stopped him in the hallway. "Mr. Ricks, can I have a word with you?" she asked, her tone serious but kind. "Of course," Peter replied, following her into her office. Ms. Ramirez gestured for him to sit. "I wanted to let you know that we've been approached by the district. They're interested in hearing about the initiatives we've implemented here, the kindness group, the mentorship program, everything. They think it could be a model for other schools." Peter blinked, stunned. "That's incredible," he said, a mix of pride and disbelief in his voice. "It is," Ms. Ramirez agreed, "and I was hoping you'd join me at the district meeting to share your perspective. Your involvement has been instrumental in making all of this happen." Peter hesitated, the weight of the request sinking in. He had never seen himself as a public speaker, but he couldn't deny the importance of the opportunity. "I'd be honored," he said finally, his resolve strengthening. The day of the district meeting arrived, and Peter found himself standing in front of a room full of administrators, educators, and parents. His palms were sweaty, but as he glanced at a picture of Keisha he had tucked into his pocket, a sense of calm washed over him. "My name is Peter Ricks," he began, his voice steady. "And I'm here to share a story about my daughter, and about how a small act of kindness can lead to big changes." As Peter recounted Keisha's journey, the room grew silent, every pair of eyes fixed on him. He spoke about the challenges she had faced, the courage she had shown, and the incredible ripple effect her actions had created. "Our children deserve a safe, supportive environment where they can thrive," he concluded. "It's up to all of us, parents, teachers, and community leaders, to make that a reality, and together, we can." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Peter felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This was more than he had ever envisioned when he first set out to protect his daughter. That evening, as Peter recounted the day's events to Keisha, she looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think I'll make a difference when I grow up?" Peter smiled, pulling her into a hug. "Sweetheart, you already have." And as they sat together, wrapped in the warmth of their shared journey, Peter knew that the future was bright, not just for Keisha, but for all the lives she had touched. As Peter tucked Keisha into bed that night, his heart felt both heavy and light. Heavy with the realization of how far they had come, how much had changed since that first day of preschool when he noticed her shoulders slump under the weight of unseen struggles, and light with the knowledge that his little girl was blossoming in ways he could never have imagined. "Daddy?" Keisha said softly, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Yes, sweetheart?" Peter asked, brushing a curl away from her forehead. "Do you think other kids feel like I did before? You know, sad and scared?" Peter's chest tightened at the thought. "I think some might," he admitted gently. "But because of you and everything we've done together, I think there are fewer kids feeling that way now." Keisha nodded, her little brow furrowing. "I don't want anyone to feel like that ever again." Peter smiled at her determination. Me neither, sweetheart. And that's why we keep working, keep helping. Every little bit of kindness we share can make a big difference. Keisha's eyelids began to droop, but a small smile played on her lips. Okay, Daddy, she murmured. We'll keep being kind. As she drifted off to sleep, Peter sat by her bedside for a long time, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. He thought about her question and the profoundness of it. Children should never have to worry about exclusion, cruelty, or fear. Yet, in their small way, he and Keisha had shown that change was possible, one act of kindness at a time. The next morning, Peter woke with a renewed sense of purpose. Keisha's words had sparked something in him, a desire to push their work even further. He spent the day brainstorming ways to expand their efforts, jotting down ideas and contacting other parents who had expressed interest in helping. One idea that kept coming back to him was the creation of a broader community initiative. What if they could build a program that went beyond the preschool, reaching children and families throughout the entire town? He envisioned workshops for parents, interactive events for kids, and partnerships with local organizations to create a sustained culture of kindness and inclusion. That evening, as Peter sat with Keisha at the dinner table, he decided to share his idea. Sweetheart, what do you think about doing something big? Something that could help not just your school, but lots of kids in our town. Keisha's eyes lit up. Like what, Daddy? Well, Peter began, leaning forward conspiratorially. I was thinking we could start a group, kind of like your kindness club, but for everyone. We could have fun events, teach kids about being kind, and even help parents learn how to talk to their kids about feelings. Keisha's excitement was palpable. That sounds amazing. Can we do it soon? Peter laughed, her enthusiasm contagious. We'll need some time to plan it out, but yes, I think we can, and I'm going to need your help. Will you be my partner? Keisha nodded vigorously. Of course, Daddy. Over the next several weeks, Peter threw himself into making the idea a reality. He reached out to local community centers, schools, and even the library, pitching his vision for the initiative. He was met with an outpouring of support, and soon the pieces began to fall into place. The program, which they named Heart to Heart, was designed to foster empathy and kindness through education and community engagement. It featured monthly workshops for families, art and storytelling events for kids, and even volunteer opportunities for older children to mentor younger ones. Keisha became the unofficial ambassador of the program, her story inspiring everyone who heard it. She spoke at the first Heart to Heart event, her small voice carrying a powerful message. When you're kind to someone, she said, standing on a small stage in front of a room full of families, it's like giving them a little piece of sunshine. And the more sunshine we share, the brighter the world gets. The audience erupted into applause, and Peter felt a lump form in his throat as he watched his daughter shine. Heart to Heart quickly became a beloved part of the community. Families from all walks of life participated, sharing their own stories and learning from one another. The local newspaper even ran a feature on the program, highlighting its positive impact and praising Peter and Keisha's efforts. One day, as Peter reviewed plans for an upcoming event, he received a call from a reporter who had heard about Heart to Heart. Mr. Ricks? The reporter said, I'm writing a piece about grassroots community initiatives that are making a real difference. I'd love to interview you and Keisha about your work. Peter hesitated for a moment, still unaccustomed to being in the spotlight. But then he thought of Keisha and the message they wanted to share. We'd be happy to, he said. The interview was scheduled for the following week, and when the day arrived, Peter and Keisha sat side by side in their living room, answering the reporter's questions. What inspired you to start this program? The reporter asked. Peter glanced at Keisha, a warm smile on his face. It all started with my daughter, he said. She showed me how powerful kindness can be, even in the face of challenges. This program is our way of spreading that lesson to as many people as we can. Keisha added, her voice steady and confident. When you're kind, it makes you feel happy, and it makes other people feel happy too. That's why we do it. The article, published under the headline, Father-Daughter Duo Sparks Kindness Movement, garnered widespread attention. People from neighboring towns began reaching out, asking how they could start similar programs in their own communities. As Heart to Heart grew, so did Peter and Keisha's bond. They spent countless hours working together, planning events and brainstorming new ideas. For Peter, it was a reminder of how far they had come, from the days of worry and uncertainty to this place of hope and purpose. One evening, after wrapping up a successful event, Peter and Keisha sat on their porch swing, gazing at the stars. "Daddy," Keisha said softly, "do you think we'll keep doing this forever?" Peter smiled, pulling her close. "I hope so, sweetheart, because every time we help someone, it makes the world just a little bit better." Keisha nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "Then let's keep going." And as they sat there, the cool night air wrapping around them, Peter felt a profound sense of peace. They were not only building a better future for themselves, but for everyone whose lives they touched. Together, they were proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark a movement. The momentum behind the Heart to Heart initiative continued to grow, with new faces joining each event and fresh ideas pouring in from families eager to contribute. Peter found himself busier than ever, juggling his regular responsibilities with the demands of running a program that had now taken on a life of its own. Yet, despite the long hours, he never felt overwhelmed. Each moment he spent on the initiative reminded him of its purpose, and of Keisha, whose unwavering enthusiasm kept him motivated. Keisha, for her part, had fully embraced her role as a leader within Heart to Heart. She had a way of connecting with other children that was both natural and profound, whether it was through a smile, a hug, or a simple invitation to join in an activity. Keisha's kindness seemed to draw people in and put them at ease. One afternoon, during a heart-to-heart art workshop, Keisha noticed a boy sitting alone in the corner of the room. His shoulders were hunched and he stared at the ground, ignoring the paper and crayons in front of him. Without hesitation, Keisha walked over and sat down beside him. "Hi," she said softly, her voice gentle. "I'm Keisha. What's your name?" The boy glanced at her briefly before mumbling, "Dylan." "That's a cool name," Keisha said with a smile. "Do you like to draw?" Dylan shrugged. "I'm not good at it," he said quietly. "That's okay," Keisha replied. "You don't have to be good. It's just for fun. Want to see what I made?" She held up her paper, which was covered in colorful swirls and shapes. "It's a rainbow heart," she explained. "My dad says hearts are like magic. They can hold all the love and kindness you give to other people." Dylan's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "That's pretty cool," he admitted. "Thanks," Keisha said, sliding a blank sheet of paper toward him. "Do you want to try making one too? I can help if you want." Dylan hesitated for a moment before picking up a crayon. As the two of them worked side by side, Peter watched from across the room, his heart swelling with pride. He could see the way Dylan's posture relaxed, his face lighting up as he and Keisha chatted and laughed. Later that evening, as Peter and Keisha cleaned up the workshop, Ms. Ramirez approached them with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Ricks, Keisha," she began, "I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for our community. This program has truly changed lives." Peter smiled. "It's been a team effort," he said modestly. "We're just glad to see people coming together." Ms. Ramirez nodded. "There's something else I wanted to share. The district superintendent reached out to me recently. They're interested in incorporating the heart-to-heart model into schools across the district." Peter's eyes widened. "You mean expanding the program?" "Exactly," Ms. Ramirez said. "They want to use your initiative as a blueprint for creating similar programs in other schools. They're even willing to allocate funding for training and resources." Peter was momentarily speechless. What had started as a small act of love for his daughter was now blossoming into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. "That's incredible," he said finally, his voice tinged with awe. "I don't even know what to say." Ms. Ramirez smiled. "You deserve this, Peter. Your hard work and dedication have inspired so many people. This is just the beginning." In the weeks that followed, Peter and Keisha found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Meetings with district officials, presentations to school boards, and workshops for educators became a regular part of their schedule. Through it all, Keisha remained by Peter's side, her presence a constant source of inspiration. One day, after a particularly successful presentation, Peter and Keisha sat in a quiet park near their house, enjoying ice cream cones and reflecting on their journey. "Daddy," Keisha said, licking a drip of chocolate off her cone, "do you think this will help other kids like Dylan?" "I think it will help a lot of kids, sweetheart," Peter replied. "And it's all because of you." Keisha tilted her head, a puzzled expression on her face. "Me? But you're the one who did all the grown-up stuff." Peter chuckled. "Maybe, but you were the one who showed me what needed to be done. Your kindness, your courage. It's what started all of this. Without you, none of this would have happened." Keisha's face broke into a wide grin. "Then I guess we make a pretty good team." "We sure do," Peter said, pulling her into a side hug. As Heart to Heart expanded, it began to attract attention from beyond their local community. News outlets covered the program, and parents from across the state reached out to Peter for advice on starting similar initiatives. Invitations to speak at conferences and workshops began pouring in, and while Peter initially felt out of his depth, he soon realized how important it was to share their story. One of the most memorable moments came when Peter and Keisha were invited to speak at a national education conference. Standing on a stage in front of hundreds of educators, Peter felt a familiar wave of nerves, but as he glanced at Keisha, who stood confidently beside him, he found his courage. "My daughter taught me something I'll never forget," Peter said, his voice steady. "Kindness isn't just something you do, it's something you live. It's about showing up for others, even in the smallest ways, and believing that those small acts can change the world." The audience gave them a standing ovation, and as Peter and Keisha walked off the stage hand in hand, Peter felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. Heart to Heart continued to thrive, and Peter and Keisha remained deeply involved in its growth. Yet, amidst all the success, Peter never lost sight of what truly mattered: the bond he shared with his daughter. One quiet evening, as they sat together on the porch swing, Keisha turned to Peter with a thoughtful look. "Daddy, do you think the world will ever be kind all the time?" she asked. Peter considered her question carefully. "I think the world will always have challenges," he said honestly. "But I also think that every act of kindness brings us closer to that kind of world. And as long as there are people like you, spreading love and understanding, I think we're going to be okay." Keisha smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Then I'll keep being kind forever." Peter hugged her tightly, his heart full. "And I'll be right there with you, sweetheart. Always." As the stars twinkled above them, Peter realized that their journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to spread their message, to touch lives, and to make the world just a little brighter, one heart at a time. As the months passed, Heart to Heart solidified its place as a cornerstone of the community, weaving kindness into the fabric of everyday life. The program's expansion across schools was met with enthusiasm, and Peter found himself in a role he never imagined: a community leader and advocate for change. Keisha, too, had grown into her role as an ambassador for kindness, becoming a familiar face at events and a source of inspiration for children and adults alike. One chilly afternoon, as Peter and Keisha prepared for another workshop at a neighboring school, Keisha asked a question that caught Peter off guard. "Daddy, do you think I'll still be part of Heart to Heart when I grow up?" Peter paused, his hands stilling as he packed a box of supplies into their car. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well," Keisha said thoughtfully, climbing into the back seat, "I know grown-ups get busy. What if I get too busy to help with kindness stuff?" Peter slid into the driver's seat and turned to face her, his expression serious but gentle. "Keisha, being kind isn't about how much time you have. It's about the way you live your life. Even if you're busy, you can still be kind in small ways every day. That's what matters most. Keisha considered his words for a moment, then nodded firmly. Okay. I promise I'll always be kind, even when I'm a grown-up. Peter smiled. That's a promise I know you'll keep. The workshop that day focused on teaching children how to express their feelings in healthy ways, a subject Peter had come to understand deeply through his experiences with Keisha. As he stood in front of a group of elementary school students, he held up a jar filled with glitter and water. This is what it feels like when you're upset, he explained, shaking the jar until the glitter swirled furiously. Sometimes, our thoughts and feelings get all mixed up, and it's hard to think clearly. The children watched intently as the glitter settled. But when we take a deep breath and give ourselves time, everything starts to calm down, Peter continued, his voice soothing. Then we can see things more clearly and make better choices. Keisha stepped forward, holding a jar of her own. And if you're ever feeling upset, you can tell a grown-up, she added. They can help you feel better. The children nodded, some clutching their own glitter jars that they had made during the workshop. Peter felt a surge of pride as he watched Keisha interact with the group, her calm and kind demeanor putting everyone at ease. One of the unexpected outcomes of Heart to Heart was the impact it had on parents. Many had come to Peter after events, sharing how the program had inspired them to rethink the way they approached parenting and communication. Mr. Ricks, a mother named Amanda said one evening, I just wanted to thank you. My son used to bottle up his feelings, but since we started coming to these workshops, he's been opening up more. It's like he's a different kid. That's wonderful to hear, Peter replied. It's amazing what a little understanding and encouragement can do. Amanda hesitated before adding, and honestly, it's helped me too. I've started practicing what we've learned here at home, and it's made a big difference in how we handle tough moments. Peter's heart swelled with gratitude. He hadn't anticipated how far-reaching the program's effects would be, but moments like this reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. As Heart to Heart gained recognition, it began to attract the attention of larger organizations. One day, Peter received an email from a national nonprofit dedicated to fostering emotional intelligence in children. They wanted to partner with Heart to Heart to create a curriculum that could be distributed nationwide. The idea thrilled Peter, but it also felt daunting. The scale of the project was far beyond anything he had ever tackled before. As he sat at the kitchen table staring at the email, Keisha walked in, carrying a plate of cookies she had helped bake. "Daddy, why do you look worried?" she asked, setting the plate down in front of him. Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just got a big opportunity for Heart to Heart, but it's a lot of work. I'm not sure if I'm ready for it." Keisha tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Remember what you always tell me, Daddy. If something feels scary, it's because it's important." Peter chuckled, amazed at how his own words had come back to him. "You're right, sweetheart. Thank you for reminding me." With renewed determination, Peter dove into the partnership. He collaborated with the nonprofit's team to create a series of lesson plans, activities, and resources that could be used in schools and community centers across the country. Throughout the process, Keisha remained his biggest cheerleader, offering ideas and feedback with the wisdom and enthusiasm of someone far beyond her years. When the curriculum was finally completed, it was met with widespread praise. Schools from coast to coast began adopting the program, and Peter received countless messages from educators and parents expressing their gratitude. One day, as Peter read through an email from a teacher in Montana, he felt a familiar tug on his sleeve. Keisha stood beside him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Daddy, guess what?" she said, bouncing on her toes. "What is it, sweetheart?" "My teacher said our class is going to use the new Heart to Heart lessons next week," Keisha exclaimed. "She even asked me if I wanted to help teach it." Peter's face broke into a wide smile. "That's amazing, Keisha. I'm so proud of you." Keisha beamed. "I'm proud of us, Daddy." The day Keisha's class used the Heart to Heart curriculum was a milestone Peter would never forget. He had the chance to sit in the back of the room, watching as Keisha led her classmates through an activity about recognizing emotions. "This is the happy face," Keisha said, holding up a card with a smiling emoji. "And this one is for when you feel worried." She pointed to another card, her voice steady and clear. As the children participated, Peter marveled at how much Keisha had grown. She was no longer the quiet, uncertain girl who had struggled to find her place. She was confident, compassionate, and a leader in every sense of the word. When the lesson ended, Keisha ran over to Peter, her face glowing with pride. "How did I do, Daddy?" she asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. "You were amazing," Peter said, pulling her into a hug. "You're making such a big difference, sweetheart." Keisha smiled against his chest. "We both are." As the years went by, Heart to Heart continued to thrive, evolving and growing alongside Peter and Keisha. Though challenges arose, as they always do, Peter never wavered in his commitment to the cause, knowing that every step forward brought them closer to their dream of a kinder, more connected world. And as Keisha grew, she carried the lessons of her journey with her, spreading kindness and empathy wherever she went. Together, they proved that no act of love or compassion is ever too small to create lasting change. Their story became a testament to the power of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And as they faced the future hand in hand, they knew that the best was yet to come. As Heart to Heart solidified its place in the fabric of communities across the country, Peter couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. What had started as a desperate attempt to help his daughter navigate the challenges of preschool had blossomed into a national movement that was changing lives. But for Peter, the most important impact was the one closest to home, the profound bond he had built with Keisha. One crisp fall evening, as the leaves swirled outside their living room window, Peter and Keisha sat together at the dining table, brainstorming ideas for the next Heart to Heart event. Keisha's notebook was open in front of her, filled with colorful doodles and notes in her neat handwriting. "I think we should do something about sharing," Keisha said, tapping her pencil against her chin. "Sometimes kids don't want to share their toys, and it makes other kids feel left out." Peter nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great idea, sweetheart. What if we set up a game or an activity that shows how fun sharing can be?" Keisha's eyes lit up. "Like a treasure hunt, but instead of keeping the treasure, you share it with someone else." Peter grinned. "I love it. Let's call it the sharing adventure." Keisha clapped her hands in excitement. "This is going to be so much fun." The sharing adventure turned out to be one of Heart to Heart's most popular events yet. Families gathered in the local park, where Peter and his team had set up a series of stations with activities designed to teach children the joy of sharing. At one station, children worked together to build a giant block tower, each adding pieces to create a masterpiece. At another, they decorated cookies and shared their creations with friends and family. The highlight of the day was the treasure hunt, where kids collected small trinkets and then gifted them to their teammates. Peter watched as Keisha led a group of younger children through the activities, her enthusiasm infectious. At one point, he noticed her crouching beside a little girl who seemed hesitant to join in. "It's okay if you're nervous," Keisha said gently. "I was nervous the first time I came to a Heart to Heart event too. But you know what? Everyone here is super nice, and we're all here to have fun together." The girl nodded slowly, her expression softening. Keisha took her hand and guided her to the block tower station, where she quickly became engrossed in the activity. Peter felt a surge of pride as he watched the scene unfold. Keisha's ability to connect with others was a gift, and it was one that continued to grow with every event. As the weeks went by, Heart to Heart continued to expand its reach, touching the lives of families from all walks of life. Peter and Keisha traveled to towns and cities across the state, sharing their message and working with local communities to establish new chapters of the program. One afternoon, during a visit to a small rural school, Peter was approached by a teacher named Ms. Green. "Mr. Ricks," she began, her voice filled with emotion, "I just wanted to thank you for bringing Heart to Heart here. Our kids don't always get access to programs like this, and it's made such a difference already." Peter smiled warmly. "That means so much to hear. How are the kids responding? Ms. Green's eyes brightened. They love it. And it's not just the kids. Our whole community feels more connected. Parents are coming together, and even our staff has started using some of the techniques we've learned in the workshops. Peter nodded, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. That's exactly what we hoped for. Heart to Heart is about more than just teaching kindness. It's about building a sense of belonging for everyone. Back at home, Peter and Keisha found moments of quiet amidst the whirlwind of their work. One evening, as they curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, Keisha asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Daddy, do you think people will still remember Heart to Heart when we're not doing it anymore?" Peter's chest tightened at the thought. "Sweetheart, I think Heart to Heart will always be here, even if we're not running it. It's not just about us, it's about all the people who've been part of it and all the lives it's touched." Keisha nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Like ripples in a pond?" Peter smiled. "Exactly. Every act of kindness is like a ripple, spreading out and touching more and more people. And you've made so many ripples, Keisha." Keisha grinned, leaning her head against Peter's shoulder. "Then I guess we've made a big, happy pond." Peter laughed, wrapping an arm around her. "We sure have, sweetheart." As Heart to Heart approached its 5-year anniversary, Peter and Keisha began planning a celebration to mark the milestone. They decided to host a festival that would bring together families from all the program's chapters, celebrating the power of kindness and the connections they had built. The festival, held in a sprawling park, was a resounding success. There were booths showcasing each chapter's unique contributions, performances by children who had participated in Heart to Heart programs, and a giant mural where attendees could write messages of kindness and gratitude. Keisha, now a confident and poised young girl, gave a speech during the opening ceremony. Standing on the stage, her voice steady and clear, she addressed the crowd. "Heart to Heart started because I was scared and sad," she began. "But my daddy helped me see that being kind could make things better, not just for me, but for everyone. Now it's not just about us. It's about all of you. Together we've made something amazing, and I know we'll keep making the world brighter, one kind act at a time." The audience erupted into applause, and Peter felt tears sting his eyes as he watched his daughter beam with pride. As the festival wound down, Peter and Keisha stood together, looking out at the crowd of families laughing and talking, their faces glowing with joy. "Daddy," Keisha said softly, "do you think we'll ever stop doing Heart to Heart?" Peter knelt down beside her, his expression serious but full of love. "Sweetheart, Heart to Heart isn't just something we do. It's who we are. Whether we're running events or just being kind in our everyday lives, we'll always carry it with us." Keisha smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. "Then I guess we'll always be Heart to Heart." Peter pulled her into a hug, his heart full. "Always, Keisha. Always." And as they stood together under the setting sun, surrounded by the love and laughter of a community they had helped to build, Peter knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to spread kindness and compassion, creating ripples that would touch the world for generations to come.